little book dance party. You ever have book dance parties where you just get a book and do a little book dance? Yeah, that guy's crazy. Okay, so chapter 3, it's called The Fastest Kid in the 5th Grade. Let's review real quick. Where were we last time? Jess loves to draw. He shows his drawings to, well, I miss Burke there. That is not correct. It's Miss Edmonds. My mistake. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I did that. I'm pretty sure it's Miss Edmonds. Sorry about that. Um, anyway, lost my train of thought. Here we go. So then basically, Jess loves to draw. He loves Miss Edmonds, the music teacher, and then he meets his new neighbor, whose name is Leslie Burke. So now we're going to start the fastest kid in the 5th grade. So here we go. Let's do this. All right. Remember, I would like you to please follow along, read along. You have the PDF. You have the video here where you can make it big. Follow along. So here we go. The fastest kid in the 5th grade. Jess didn't see Leslie Burke again, except from a distance, until the first day of school, the following Tuesday, when Mr. Turner brought her down to Mrs. Meyer's 5th grade class at Lark Creek Elementary. Leslie was still dressed in the faded cutoffs and the blue undershirt. She had sneakers on her feet, but no socks. Surprise swooshed up from the class like steam from a released radiator. They were all sitting there, primly dressed in their spring Sunday best. Even Jess wore his one pair of corduroys and an iron shirt. The reaction didn't seem to bother her. She stood there in front, her eyes saying, "Okay, friends, here I am," in answer to their open-mouthed stare, while Mrs. Myers fluttered about, trying to figure where to put the extra desk. The room was a small basement one, and 5 rows of 6 desks already filled it more than comfortably. 31, Mrs. Myers kept mumbling over her double chin. 31, no one else has more than 29. She finally decided to put the desk up against the side wall near the front. "Just there for now, Leslie. It's the best we can do for now. This is a very crowded classroom." She swung her pointed glance at Mr. Turner's retreating form. Leslie waited quietly until the 7th grade boy, who had been sent down with the extra desk, scraped it into position hard against the radiator and under the first window. Without making any noise, she pulled it a few inches forward from the radiator and settled herself into it. Then she turned once more to gaze at the rest of the class. 30 pairs of eyes were suddenly focused on desktop scratches. Jess ran his forefinger around the heart with 2 pairs of initials, BR and SK, trying to figure out whose desk he had inherited. Probably Sally Koch's. Girls did more of the hard stuff in 5th grade than boys. Besides, BR must be Billy Rudd, and Billy was known to favor Myrna Hauser last spring. Of course, these initials might have been here longer than that. In which case, Jess Aarons, Bobby Greggs, pass out the arithmetic books, please. On the last word, Mrs. Myers flashed her famous first day of school smile. It was said in the upper grades that Mrs. Myers had never been seen to smile except on the first and the last day of school. Jess roused himself and went to the front. As he passed Leslie's desk, she grinned and rippled her fingers in a low kind of wave. He jerked a nod. He couldn't help feeling sorry for her. It must be embarrassing to sit in front when you find yourself dressed funny on the first day of school, and you don't know anybody. He slapped the books down as Mrs. Myers directed. Gary Fulcher grabbed his arm as he went by. "Gonna run today?" Jess nodded. Gary smirked. "He thinks he can beat me, the dumbhead." At the thought, something jiggled inside Jess. He knew he was better than he had been last spring. Fulcher might think he was going to be the best, now that Wayne Pettis was in 6th, but he, Jess, planned to give old Fulcher a little surprise come noon. It was as though he had swallowed grasshoppers. He could hardly wait. Mrs. Myers handed out books almost as though she were President of the United States, dragging the distribution process out in senseless signings and ceremonies. It occurred to Jess that she too wished to postpone regular school as long as possible. When it wasn't his turn to pass out books, Jess sneaked out a piece of notebook paper and drew. He was toying with the idea of doing a whole book of drawings. He ought to choose one chief character and do a story about it. He scribbled several ideas and tried to think of a name. A good title would get him started. The Haunted Hippo? He liked the ring of it. Herbie the Haunted Hippo. Even better. The Case of the Crooked Crocodile. Not bad. What you drawing? Gary Fulcher was leaning way over his desk. Jess covered the page with his arm. Nothing. Oh, come on, let me see. Jess shook his head. Gary reached down and tried to pull Jess's hand away from the paper. The Case of the Come on, Jess, he whispered hoarsely. I ain't gonna hurt nothing. He yanked at Jess's thumb. Jess put both arms over the paper and brought his sneaker heel crashing down on Gary Fulcher's toe. Yow! Boys! Mrs. Myers' face had lost its lemon pie smile. Take your seat, Gary! But sit down! Jesse Aarons, one more peep from your direction and you could spend recess in here, copying the dictionary. Jess's face was burning hot. He slid the notepaper back under his desktop and put his head down. A whole year of this? 8 more years of this? He wasn't sure he could stand it. The children ate lunch at their desks. The county had been promising Lark Creek a lunchroom for 20 years, but there never seemed to be enough money. Jess had been so careful not to lose his recess time that even now he chewed his bologna sandwich with his lips tight shut and his eyes on the initialed heart. Around him, conversations buzzed. They were not supposed to talk during lunch, but it was the first day, and even Monster Mouth Myers shot fewer flames on the first day. She's eating clabber. 2 seats up from where he sat, Mary Lou Peoples was at work, being the second snottiest girl in the 5th grade. Yogurt, stupid! Don't you watch TV? This from Wanda K. Moore, the snottiest, who sat immediately in front of Jess. Yuck! Lord, why couldn't they leave people in peace? Why shouldn't Leslie Burke eat anything she darn pleased? He forgot that he was trying to eat carefully and took a loud slurp of his milk. Wanda Moore turned around all priss-face. Jesse Aarons! That noise is pure repulsive! He glared at her hard and gave another slurp. You're disgusting. The recess bell. With a yelp, the boys were pushing for first place at the door. The boys will all sit down. Oh, Lord. While the girls line up to go out to the playground. Ladies first. The boys quivered at the edges of their seats like moths fighting to be freed of cocoons. Would she never let them go? All right, now if you boys... They didn't give her a chance to change her mind. They were halfway to the end of the field before she could finish her sentence. The first 2 out began dragging their toes to make the finish line. The ground was rutted from past rains, but had hardened in the late summer drought. So they had to give up on sneaker toes and draw the line with a stick. 5th grade boys, bursting with new importance, ordered the 4th graders this way and that, while the smaller boys tried to include themselves without being conspicuous. How many of you guys gonna run? Gary Fulcher demanded. Me, 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 everyone yelled. That's too many. No, first, second, or third graders. Except maybe the Butcher cousins and Timmy Vaughn. The rest of you will just be in the way. Shoulders sagged, but the little boys backed away obediently. Okay, that leaves 26. 27 stands 28. You get 28, Greg? Fulcher asked Greg Williams, his shadow. Right, 28. Okay, now, we'll have eliminations like always. Count off by fours. Then we'll run all the ones together, then the twos. We know. Everyone was impatient with Gary, who was trying for all the world to sound like this year's Wayne Pettis. Jess was a 4, which suited him well enough. He was impatient to run, but he really didn't mind having a chance to see how the others were doing since spring. Fulcher was a 1, of course, having started everything with himself. Jess grinned at Fulcher's back and stuck his hands into his pockets of his corduroys, wriggling his right forefinger through the hole. Gary won the first heat easily and had plenty of breath left to boss the organizing of the second. A few of the younger boys drifted off to play King of the Mountain on the slope between the upper and lower fields. Out of the corner of his eye, Jess saw someone coming down from the upper field. He turned his back and pretended to concentrate on Fulcher's high-pitched commands. Hi! Leslie Burke had come up beside him. He shifted slightly away. Oh. Aren't you running? Later. Maybe if he didn't look at her, she would go back to the upper field where she belonged. Gary told Earl Watson to bang the start. Jess watched. Nobody with much speed in that crowd. He kept his eyes on the shirt tails and bent backs. A fight broke out at the finish line between Jimmy Mitchell and Clyde Deal. Everyone rushed to see. Jess was aware that Leslie Burke stayed at his elbow, but he was careful not to look at her. Clyde, Gary Fulcher made his declaration. It was Clyde. It was a tie, Fulcher, a fourth grader protested. I was standing right here. Clyde Deal. Jimmy Mitchell's jaw was set. I won, Fulcher. You couldn't even see from way back there. It was Deal. Gary ignored the protests. We're wasting time. All threes line up right now. Jimmy's fists went up. Ain't fair, Fulcher. Gary turned his back and headed for the starting line. Oh, let them both run the finals. What's it going to hurt? Jess said loudly. Gary stopped walking and wheeled to face him. Fulcher stared first at Jess and then at Leslie Burke. Next thing, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Next thing, you're going to want to let some girl run. Jess's face went on. Sure, he said recklessly. Why not? He turned deliberately toward Leslie. Want to run? He asked. Sure, she was grinning. Why not? You ain't scared to let a girl race, are you, Fulcher? For a minute, he thought Gary was going to sock him, and he stiffened. He mustn't let Fulcher suspect that he was scared of a little belt in the mouth. But instead, Gary broke into a trot and started bossing the threes into the line for their heat. You can run with the fours, Leslie, he said it loudly enough to make sure Fulcher could hear him, and then concentrated on the runners. See, he told himself, you could stand up to creep like Fulcher. No sweat. Bobby Miller won the threes easily. He was the best of the fourth graders, almost as fast as Fulcher. But not as good as me, Jess thought. He was beginning to get really excited now. There wasn't anybody in the fours who could give him much of a race. Still, it would be better to give Fulcher a scare by running well in the heat. Leslie lined up beside him Leslie lined up beside him. It says on the fight. That doesn't make sense. Leslie lined up beside him on the line. I'm guessing. Oh, on the right. On the right. Leslie lined up beside him on the right. He moved a tiny bit to the left, but she didn't seem to notice. At the bang, Jess shot forward. It felt good. Even the rough ground against the bottom of his worn sneakers, he was pumping good. He could almost smell Gary Fulcher's surprise at his improvement. The crowd was noisier than they'd been during the other heats. Maybe they were all noticing. He wanted to look back and see where the others were, but he resisted the temptation. It would seem conceited to look back. He concentrated on the line ahead. It was nearing with every step. "Oh, Miss Bessie, if you could see me now." He felt it before he saw it. Someone was moving up. He automatically pumped harder. Then the shape was there in his sideways vision. Then suddenly pulling ahead, he forced himself now. His breath was choking him. His sweat was in his eyes. But he saw the figure anyhow. The faded cutoffs crossed the line 3 feet ahead of him. Leslie turned to face him with a wide smile on her tanned face. He stumbled, and without a word began half walking, half trotting over to the starting line. This was the day that he was going to be champion. The best runner of the 4th and 5th grades, and he hadn't even won his heat. There was no cheering at either end of the field. The rest of the boys seemed as stunned as he. The teasing would come later, he felt sure. But at least for the moment, none of them were talking. "Okay," Fulcher took over. He tried to appear very much in charge. "Okay, you guys, you can line up for the finals." He walked over to Leslie. "Okay, you had your fun. You can run on to the hopscotch now." "But I won the heat," she said. Gary lowered his head like a bull. "Girls aren't supposed to play on the lower field. Better get up there before one of the teachers sees you." "I want to run," she said quietly. "You already did." "What's the matter, Fulcher?" All Jess's anger was bubbling out. He couldn't seem to stop this blow. "What's the matter? Scared to race her?" Fulcher's fists went up, but Jess walked away from it. Fulcher would have to let her run now. He knew it. And Fulcher did, angrily and grudgingly. She beat him. She came in first and turned his large shining eyes on a bunch of dumb sweating mad faces. The bell rang. Jess started across the lower field, his hands deep in his pockets. She caught up with him. He took his hands out and began to trot toward the hill. She got him in enough trouble. She speeded up and refused to be shaken off. "Thanks," she said. "Yeah? For what?" he was thinking. "You're the only kid in this whole darn school who's worth shooting." He wasn't sure. He thought her voice was quivering. But he wasn't going to start feeling sorry again for her. "So shoot me," he said. On the bus that afternoon, he did something he had never thought he would do. He sat down beside Maybelle. It was the only way he could make sure that he wouldn't have Leslie plunking herself down beside him. Lord, the girl had no notion of what you did and didn't do. He stared out the window, but he knew she had come and was sitting across the aisle from them. He heard her say, "Jess?" once, but the bus was noisy enough that he could pretend that he hadn't heard. When they came to the stop, he grabbed Maybelle's hand and dragged her off, conscious that Leslie was right behind them. But she didn't try to speak to him again, nor did she follow them. She just took off running to the old Perkins place. He couldn't help turning to watch. She ran as though it was her nature. It reminded him of the flight of wild ducks in the autumn. So smooth. The word beautiful came to his mind. But he shook it away and hurried up toward the house. All right, let's talk about the chapter here. What's going on? What's it mean? So, all right, the kids at school are going to race. Jess wants to win. Leslie, a girl, also wants to race. All right, so let me ask you, who will be the fastest kid in the 5th grade? We know that Jess wants to be the fastest. He practices to be the fastest. He plans to be the fastest. But is he the fastest? Well, you could have guessed, these are some guesses you could have had. He will be the fastest. He will win the races. Or no, Jess will not be the fastest. Okay? He will lose the race. But again, this is a guess. This question is asking you, the reader, what you think. Now, we finished the chapter, so we know what actually happens. But we're just thinking here. All right, this is kind of funny. The teacher, her double chin, whoops, got a double chin. All right, that's where you got a little fat here. I got a little bit of one, I guess. That stinks. All right, double chin. So she's kind of a big lady. She's mumbling over. I got so many kids in this class, and they keep giving me more students. What am I supposed to do? All right. On Jess's desk, the letters are carved into it. All right, and so he just, the word is to favor, thinking of favorite, right? To favor is when you like someone or you love them. All right, arithmetic, the math book. So they're handing out the math books. All right, he thinks he can beat me, the dumbhead. Now, let's see here. Because we are using this PDF. On. The wrong button here. Yeah, I think this PDF is a little bit dumb. I said dumb because I said dumbhead. I meant different. It's been a long day. Yeah, I think it's just a little bit different in this particular one here. So, kind of is irrelevant. But in my copy, it's in italics, which tells us that it's said a little bit differently. Kind of doesn't matter because the copy we read doesn't have it. But in this copy here, you can see these italicized words are slightly different. They're slightly at an angle. Right? And good readers will recognize that and know that it's a little different way we should read it. So, even still, it's a secret thought that Jess has. He thinks he can beat me, the dumbhead. And of course, dumb is someone that's stupid. So dumbhead's just a silly insult. You dumbhead. Dumb. Dumb has a silent B. We don't say the B. We don't say dumb. Just dumb. And we leave it at dumb. All right. So let's see here. Oh, interesting. My copy is different. Okay, so that one doesn't really matter. All right. But this one is in here. He whispers hoarsely. Right? Horse is spelled Horse. But to whisper hoarsely is like you've got a sore throat or you're trying to be really quiet, but you also want to be loud. And it's spelled differently. Horse and horse. All right, so they sound the same, but they mean very different words. You have to look at the way it is spelled. All right. Okay. Take a look at the way it's speaking. Boys, Mrs. Meyer's face lost its lemon pie smile. He stomped my toe. Take your seat, Gary. But he, sit down. Jesse Aarons, one more peep from your direction. So we as the readers have to be careful here. Who is speaking? So we got to be careful because it's dialogue. He stomped my toe, said Gary. Take your seat, Gary, said the teacher. But he, said Gary. Sit down, said the teacher. So you got to kind of pay attention. What would this actually sound like? Who in this story would be talking and why would they be saying it? So even though the story doesn't say who is speaking, good critical readers can figure out who is speaking. All right. Dern and slurp. These are words that are kind of like dialect. Why shouldn't Leslie eat any darn thing she please? And then it says, Wanda Moore turned around with her press face. Jess errands, like all prissy, like I am so special, like a prissy girl. Sorry, that's embarrassing to you that I just did that. All right, sock him. Means to punch, not your socks on your feet, but sock is to punch. And in this case, it was kind of like a well-meaning punch. All right. Next, we have conceited, which is arrogant. Okay? It would seem conceited to look back. So he's running. He doesn't want to look over his shoulder. He goes, look how fast I am. He wants to, but he knows if he looks that people are going to be like, you think you're so hot. You think you're so good. All right. Who won the race? Jess did not win the race. He wanted to win badly, but the girl won. The new girl, Leslie, won the race. All right. This was the day he was going to be champion. Okay? What we're doing here is paying attention to the tense. Was going to happen. It did not happen, but it should have happened. It was going to, but it didn't. And that's why it's so frustrating. All right, we get the word what's-a, like what's the matter with you? All right, let's see if we can scroll down here and find it. What's the matter? Right? What's the matter? Okay, it's what is the matter or what's the problem? But again, some of that dialect when we're speaking, we go what's a rather than what is. And then we get the sentence, she beat him. And I like it because it's just such a simple sentence, just 3 little words, and it really just gives us a lot. Just it's plain, it's simple, it's good. All right. Leslie comes over to him and says, thanks for letting me participate. And it says her voice was quivering. Like she's almost going to cry. Like, you're the only person who was nice to me here on my first day at school at a new school, and I don't know anybody, and you were nice to me. Like her voice is just about to quiver. But he's like, nope, I'm not going to feel sorry for you. Nope. You beat me, and I don't feel bad at all. I don't even like you that much. I'm going to pretend I didn't even hear you. Just going to ignore you. You're not here. And yet, when he watches her run, she's so smooth. She really is a good runner. Beautiful. All right. So, summary. The boys are going to have the race. Jess is going to win. But then Leslie wants to race. Jess says, yeah, she should be able to run. Just because she's a girl, why not? But then she beats him and she beats everyone else. Jess is upset. But he does admit to himself that she's a good runner. All right, so look at the title of the chapter. Who is the fastest kid in 5th grade? Who's the fastest kid? Leslie. Leslie Burke is the fastest kid. All right, that's all for now. Thanks, ladies and gents.